Hello, good morning and welcome to Business News on Sunrise. Coming up, Public Interest and Accountability Committee pressures GNPC to deposit all proceeds made through Jubilee Oil Holding Limited into the Petroleum Holding Fund.
Any money from DOHL should come into the system before allocation.
Also, Director General of Cybersecurity Authority urges players in the industry to obtain accreditation by end of September this year or face sanctions.
Any entity that offers cybersecurity services in Ghana without the license, that will be a breach of the law.
Plus, the Peasant Farmers Association of Ghana says government must scrap all taxes on agricultural inputs to address the country's high level of food inflation.
Duties that agro importers used to enjoy have been taken off. So because of the input prices has more than doubled.
My name is Menua Fo. We'll bring you the details of our headlines and many other stories shortly. Thank you for staying with us. In our first story, the Public Interest and Accountability Committee has reiterated its stance that the GNPC should deposit all proceeds made through Jubilee Oil Holding Limited into the Petroleum Holding Fund. Addressing the media, Chairperson of PIAC, Professor Kwame Adom Frimpong said this will be in accordance with the Petroleum Revenue Management Act.
When we met Minister of Finance, well, indirectly, Minister of Finance also supporting the idea because they think when the money comes in, it's going to increase the resources of the. But at times it's difficult to link the two together because GNPC is under Ministry of Finance. So we are agitating that any money from DOHL should come into the system before allocation. No, our money goes to Bank of Ghana before allocations are made, and that's what we want it to be. You haven't ended it. You haven't ended it, yes. You are still debating about it.
You heard Professor Kwame Adom Frimpong, Chairperson of PIAC. Meanwhile, the Public Interest and Accountability Committee is currently in discussions with the Ministry of Finance regarding potential changes to its act, aiming to grant prosecutorial powers for overseeing petroleum revenue management. Despite its inception, PIAC lacks the authority to prosecute individuals involved in mishandling or misappropriation of oil and petroleum funds. Chairperson of PIAC, Professor Kwame Adom Frimpong, addressed the media at the launch of his outfit's logo, data dashboard, and redesigned website here in Accra.
If you have the powers of prosecution and we have our own solicitors or lawyers, then you can go ahead and challenge some of these lapses. That's what we are fighting for. But luckily, the Minister of Finance has come out for a review of the act, which we have presented our proposals. So we are sure to come into session if they take us serious, but I'm sure they will do something about it. Other than that, apart from the media, who is the solution to our problems, Parliament normally take it, but the political components enshrine in the whole system. They haven't given any deadline, but we are pushing, so at least by the end of this year, things will be done on it.
Chairperson of PIAC, Professor Kwame Adom Frimpong there. Away from that, all cybersecurity service providers and professionals in the country are expected to register for license and accreditation from the Cybersecurity Authority by September 30 this year. Failure to do so, according to the authority, will result in imposition of administrative penalties and possible prosecution. Bismarck Awusa takes up the rest of the story.
The licensing and accreditation, according to the Cybersecurity Authority, seeks to ensure cybersecurity service providers, cybersecurity establishments, and cybersecurity professionals throughout the country carry out cybersecurity-related activities in accordance with approved international best practices. Director General of the Cybersecurity Authority, Dr. Albert Ntwibo-Esiako, noted that the licensing regime is expected to provide and enhance greater assurance of cybersecurity and safety to consumers, and addressing national security concerns.
By the advice we received from our legal in-houses, by the end of September, that is certain 1st of October, any entity that offers cybersecurity services in Ghana without the license, at least either a provisional license to start with, that will be a breach of the law. And that is where we are seeking collaboration with the PPA to enforce.
For his part, Chief Executive of the Public Procurement Authority, Frank Mante, said the collaboration with the Cybersecurity Authority seeks to ensure full compliance of procurement processes with cybersecurity requirements.
Please, this is to the procurement entities. Please ensure that when you are procuring, the tenderers who are invited through a competitive process demonstrate that they've obtained this clearance. And for those applications that will be submitted to PPA through single source or restricted tenders, when you submit these applications to X without seeing this certification, we'll write back to you.
That was a report by my colleague Bismarck Awusa. Now, the Peasant Farmers Association of Ghana says to address the worrying levels of food inflation in the country, government must scrap all taxes on agric inputs. Michael Ogbodu takes up the rest of the story.
Inflation in June this year stood at a worrying 42.5%. However, this was heavily driven by food inflation, which stood at a staggering 54.2%. The situation deteriorated further the following month, with food inflation standing at 55%. The Peasant Farmers Association of Ghana has stressed the need to review the tax regime on the agricultural sector to improve the situation.
Duties that agro importers used to enjoy have been taken off. So because of the input prices has more than doubled, which also reflected on cost of production. Once there is increase in cost of production, few farmers will be able to produce. Those who are producing at a higher cost. So you have majority of farmers who have not been able to produce to their potentials because of the inputs. So if those taxes are withdrawn, I'm sure input prices will come down. Farmers will be able to produce and sell to the market at a reduced cost, thereby reducing our food price inflation.
Michael Ogbodu's report. Meanwhile, producer price inflation has increased to 32.7% for July 2023 from the 29.2% recorded in June. The 3.5 percentage points increase relative to June's PPI is reflected in the latest data provided by the Ghana Statistical Service. The Producer Price Index measures the average change over time in the prices received by domestic producers to produce their goods and services. Month on month, the change in the producer price inflation between June and July 2023 was 0.8%. For investors, producer price inflation is an indicator to predict consumer price inflation and extremely useful in analyzing potential sales and earnings. In more stories, Ghana's fiscal deficit of 9.0% of gross domestic product was the highest in West Africa in 2022. The African Development Bank West African 2023 Economic Outlook report has revealed. According to the report, the fiscal deficit to GDP fell by 0.2% from 9.2% in 2021. Ghana's fiscal deficit averaged 5.8% of GDP between 2014 and 2020. This placed it as second highest in the ECOWAS region. In 2021, fiscal deficits increased in all countries in the region except Guinea, where it declined by 0.4 and Liberia 2.1 percentage points, the report stated. The increase in fiscal deficit, it said, was however the largest in Ghana, where it increased to 9.2% of GDP in 2021 from an average of 5.8% in 2014 to 2020, attributable to underperformance in domestic revenue despite a slowdown in COVID-19 related health expenditure. In this period where low revenue and high expenditure exists, whilst the debt level rose astronomically due to high borrowings and exchange rate depreciation. Meanwhile, the situation appears to be improving, with provisional data on budget execution for the period January to May 2023 indicating an overall broad cash deficit of 1.8% of GDP against the programmed budget's target of 4.0% of GDP. Also, over 3,000 ex-employees of the defunct GN Savings and Loans Limited have called on the Bank of Ghana to restore the license of the company. With total branches numbering 300 and a customer base of 1.3 million, convener for the group, Kofi Fosu, said the bank's assets are deteriorating.
The receiver of the bank, the receiver of GN Savings, has been very lackadaisical and sluggish in safeguarding these assets. We recognize that the bank was faced with some liquidity challenges at certain points as a result of delays on the part of borrowers to settle their loan obligations on time. But a substantial portion of this credit default were due to the government's inability to honor its obligation to most of our customers who have executed jobs for some state institutions. We therefore passionately appeal to the President of the Republic to intervene by using his executive powers to urge the Governor of Bank of Ghana to restore the operating license of GN Savings.
Convener for ex-employees of the defunct GN Savings and Loans, Kofi Fosu, there. Africa Center for Energy Economic Transformation says lack of coordination among institutions and agencies within member countries of the African Continental Free Trade Area is a major hindrance to intra-regional trade on the continent. According to ASET, intra-regional trade among Africa countries is less than 18%, with Ghana exporting over 50% of its commodities outside Africa.
At a roundtable discussion to explore opportunities for domesticating the AfTA protocol to drive trade and investment in Africa, ASET urged that as AfTA protocols and frameworks are being negotiated and developed at a regional level, countries must incorporate them into their national laws to be able to effectively participate in the agreement. Principal researcher Louise Yao Afo emphasized the need for different institutions, agencies, and departments within AfTA member countries to coordinate to maximize the full potential of AfTA protocols.
Issues with immigrational laws, which is very key for labor movements. We also realize that we don't have the One African Passport project running because most countries have not ratified. We also realize that there is a need for employment institutions to align with academia, also to align with national policies. There's also the need for interministerial work among member states.
Meanwhile, Director of Research, Policy and Programs at ASET, Dr. Edward K. Brown, has this to say.
Is that intra-African trade is perhaps the lowest of any bloc trade globally. Around, 15% of trade is between African countries and the majority of the rest goes outside. But one key point that is evident, and I think this is data coming out from East Africa, which shows that intra-African trade is mainly related to value-added products, processed products. What does that mean? It means that countries that are trading among themselves are adding value to the products in their own countries.
That was a report put together by my colleague Shadrach Isrifi. Let's now take a listen to how the city is faring against major trading currencies and how some of our key commodities are faring on the global market.
On the interbank forex exchange markets, where banks trade amongst themselves, the dollar recorded no price change, selling at 11 cedis. The British pound also recorded no price change, selling at 14 cedis. The euro is selling at 12 cedis. It's recorded no price change. However, be guided that these figures will be higher at a forex bureau next year. On the global commodities markets, price of cocoa is up by 0.55%, selling at $3,452 per ton. Price of Brent crude oil is down by 1.11%, selling now at about $84 per barrel, while the price of an ounce of gold is down by 0.34%, selling at about $1,927.
That was a trip to the Forex and commodities markets. That will be all for Business News on Sunrise. My name is Minwa Fo. For more business stories, please check out our website, 3news.com. Stay tuned. Sports News is up next.
To win solid cash every day with Cash Out, be a proud winner of lots of cash simply by watching or listening